So I thought the best thing to do to have our final tutorial and to answer these questions that you guys have sent me, and majority of them are really the same, is twofold. I have one video for you to watch. It has a couple clips taken from tutorials I've made in the past that are explaining some of these questions, such as the initial masking tutorial, the initial selection tutorial. Specifically, it was a portrait. Two portraits actually. So I have a conglomerate of tutorials that I have put together for you to review, but I also thought a really good idea would just be to use some of these images you've been turning in for class as a method to show you some of these things that you're asking me about. So here's my selection here, and for some reason mine. And I have, I'm just going to use these and do some quick editing for you to see how I would be doing things to enhance them. So let's start with this one. Well, let's just open a few. And I'll see why I picked them as we go through them. All right, and some of our questions, like I said, they include masking. You're asked about dodging and burning, selective edits. So let's begin. So first we have this portrait here. There's a couple small things I would do to enhance this a little bit. As you all know, I start with making my background brighter. The non-destructive way for dodging and burning is by making a new layer, filling that layer with 50% gray, and moving that layer's blending mode to the contrast blending modes. If you remember when we went over that, the contrast blending modes are the third selection, and generally speaking, if anything is brighter than gray, it becomes even more bright, and if anything is darker than gray, it gets darker. So that's why we work in this particular blending mode of overlay. And then what you're going to do is use white and black with your paintbrush tool, and you're going to paint on your light. I'm going to start probably with an opacity around here, and I'm going to start by dodging her out a little bit in these parts where she got a little dark. All right, and just try to make the portrait pop a little more. Okay. I can see here it's starting to get a little yellow, and it just doesn't look quite right to me. So this would be a great opportunity for the history brush tool, which was another question you guys had. And what this does is, you can see here I automatically work with my history tab open, and this is because I use this tool very often. And what you do is, you can see here right now there's an icon up here. It matches the icon of the tool, and you use it as a marker to go back in time or back in history. So we're going to use our history tab to mark our first change here, because I know that all of these brush tool adjustments are the dodging I did with my white paintbrush on my dodge and burn layer, which is an overlay. And I'm just going to take out, ooh, and I'm not going to do it at 100. I'm going to do it much lower, and I'm going to do it at a hardness of 0. And let's just try to tone down this yellow. This is called blooming. Blooming is when highlights start changing colors by being blown out. So we'll just fix that a little bit. Okay, I'm going to keep doing some dodging here, and I usually just try to go a little bit at a time, because I'm always afraid of going too hard. You can see here we're losing a little bit of our shadows. Some of them are being a little bit too lost in my opinion, so we will make sure to go back and fix that also with the history brush tool. And let's just try to get a little more clarity out of this eye. All right, so you can see here that this is really excessive right now, but this is actually usually where I will begin, is kind of at a point of excessiveness, because I like to go back. So now I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to try to bring back her eyebrow darkness and try to put some dimension back into her face since I just brightened it a lot. All right, so I'll probably do a little swipe here to try to bring back the definition of her nose. Do a little quick swipe over her eyes and the eyelashes. Too much there. All right, there we go. That looks great. All right. So I just brought back a little bit of the definition that I felt like was being lost by, going back into these shadows and making sure that the shape of the eye is not lost despite the brightening that we've done so far. Okay, and next what I'm going to do is, I'll probably even go over the eye a little bit here. This left eye is just a little bit too bright for my liking. So I'll probably just bring that down a little bit also. And if you want to, we've gone over this in class, but I've explained before this notion of a catch light here, these like light spots in the eyes. We always want those in a portrait. It's how you really add life to a portrait and a little bit of a dimension to the eye. Eyes can look kind of lifeless and dead without a catch light in it. And I've definitely been known to take a catch light from one eye and compositing it into the other one or something in order to have that light reflection. So we'll bring that out a little bit also. And now I'm going to go back in and I'm going to burn other parts of this picture just to try to make sure we have our full body dimension in here. I'm going to bring down this opacity, and I'm actually going to start with this part. It's a little too dark for me. Okay. So I'm just going to bring out the parts where darkness should automatically be kind of mentally placed for us. We can kind of just, again, we're just painting it on to try to add a little more real just three-dimensional aspects to this picture. So it's just really nice focus here. I would probably, instead of doing that edit, I'd probably just enhance the shadows in the fingers here a little bit to try to just separate them a little more from each other. Like this. And this would be another opportunity where the history brush tool will be really helpful for me. So if I wasn't going to be careful, and I can just scribble all over this, I could go back after making these highlights, these shadows a little darker, and just use the history brush tool at 100. Again, I'm going to mark back a few, and I'm going to remove where I don't want that extra shadow in the highlight here. And now we can start seeing that separation a little more. So, all right. Okay, so just to show you the difference here, that was before, and this is just dodging and burning. I think she looks a little pink now from the dodging. I really love the depth of field here. I think we could sharpen it a little bit. So we'll do a couple more the selective edits you guys have asked about, and before we move on from this one. The first one that I would probably do is just try to smooth her skin. There's a couple ways that you can do that. You could, of course, take a color. Let's see, a nice middle, not orange color. Okay. And you could always paint over the face lightly. This is one way that you can do it, and try to just blend that out a little bit and make the color match. So what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of pushing that red color more towards that yellow that we have, and it's taking away the darkness in the red and kind of just lightening that part up a little bit here. All right, so I'm just gonna do a little bit more here. I don't like that last one. All right, and I would even do that under here. All right, and then this is actually pretty nice for me. The other way that is a pretty common way to soften skin is if you see these arrows, by the way, that means there's more tools in there. We can open this and use the mixer brush tool. These are the settings that I have it at. I suggest you try different settings here in order to see what would work best for you. And what this does essentially is kind of soften and blend colors together. So I'm going to go on my copied layer here, and I'm just going to show you. You can hopefully see the softening that I'm getting by blending this. And I just pick up my mouse and put it down and try to make a nice blend here to soften the skin. And I actually think it's a little too much, but I'll just lower the opacity of this when I am finished. So you can see here that it's called the mixer brush tool, which means I can literally pull this color up here the same way you could pull shadow down. So I'm going to try not to change the color too much in terms of light, but I want to change the color a little bit in terms of the splotchiness that it has. So we're just going to try to blend that in. All right, and you can see here how we're softening the skin. You can see how I sometimes have to undo my edit in order to get the actual edit I'm looking for. All right, and you can see how I'm pushing these pixels back and forth to kind of smooth out that skin there. Oops, and I'm also working with the direction the skin goes in. You'll notice I'm not doing this, right, in the areas, but that doesn't make sense. However, you can also see that by using this tool, as well as using something like the healing brush tool, you can decrease the brightness of things like these creases and shadows, or at least try to blend them together to make them a little less visible. Although my preferred preference for this would be to dodge that out more and clone this out here. All right, so what I would do, and again, this is just me assuming that, and if you want to see the difference here, there's the unsoftened skin and there's the softened skin, so you can really see like how much that brush really moves things around here, and how you might want to maybe enhance some of the changes so that they're not so intense. And in all honesty, I would probably bring down the opacity of this just a little bit, and I think that that's a nice softening right there. And another edit that you can do here would be sharpening. So let's just go to my go-to sharpen, which is high pass. You can see that I use it pretty often. There are other sharpening tools here, such as the unsharp mask. That was a really nice one. Smart sharpen's also not so bad. But a high pass is in the other section right here. You'll see here that it's putting this gray tinge on it. Let's bring this up above it. Okay. So if I turn this off, this is my dodge and burn layer. I'm turning that off. I'll turn off this color. And you can see here now that what this essentially has done is taken the details from this picture. It's finding these edges here. It's looking at things such as changes in value, changes in color, and it's making an edge. So you can see it's essentially sharpening where there are edges, and such as the hair, the eyes, the mask, and it's not sharpening places where there aren't obvious edges, the forehead, right, skin. So we're going to put this, again, since it's a gray layer, we're going to work with the contrast layers and put this onto overlay. You could try some of the other ones and see if they look any different to you, if you like them anymore. Hard light's actually not doing this a disservice. And usually hard light's kind of intense. And so you can see the difference in that sharpening there just by toggling back and forth. And then, of course, I could put the rest of my layers up. And this is our finished image. So I think that the only other thing I would do to this picture is perhaps mask out this part a little bit with the sharpening and maybe lower that just to try to make sure that we get most focus on our eyes. I would use a mask. That's what this button is here. and you work with your brush tool on white and black. Black removes, white adds. And I'm just going to do a light removal of the high pass sharpening layer right here because I think it was a little eye-catching. And other than that, I think it's pretty good. I think I might also just lower it a little on her skin a little more too, to get a little detail. All right. But things like eyelashes, things like that, you would want to keep those kind of details in. All right. And I think this is actually pretty good. If you wanted to, you could do something really specific to the eyes. Maybe, I don't know, you want to brighten them or make them look a little bluer. Well, let's just, we'll use the eyedropper tool. I'm going to go to this eye because it's the clearest and the most colorful to me. And I'm going to pick a nice saturated color that's present in the eyeball. It's not bad. Let's try a different one. I want to make a little... There, all right. So I'm going to just push this up like that a little bit. All right, so it's a more saturated version of the color. I'm going to use my paintbrush tool. And I'm probably going to use color for this one also. Just like the edit with the skin. And if I just zoom in here a little bit, 30 is probably going to be a lot. Well, let's just try it. It is way too much. You can try to just bring out and enhance that eye color a little bit. All right, and then I would, you could also try it on saturation and see how that might affect things too. So that's the saturation on. This is it with color, so you can see how it's changing. This one's kind of pushing it more towards blue. This one just increases saturation that's already there. This one also pushes it towards blue. So I think that's pretty nice. Nice and clear. We made her eyes look really nicely reflected. She has pretty nice dimension here. I would probably make the shadow more apparent. But other than that, I think that this is a much nicer edit. And just to show you what the original one was, we were originally looking at this picture. And with just 4 layers, 5 maybe, we've enhanced it to this really nice COVID portrait. The next picture I want to go over is this portrait that Olivia posted. Really nice, dreamy portrait, which I know is what you're going for, and I can see these edits here to kind of make things a little hazy. And I want to use this image as an opportunity to show you what I would do in a situation if I was trying to combine 2 exposures into one. Now I am working with JPEGs, so I can't start in the raw menu, but ideally you would have a duplicate image with 2 different raw settings, one for the background, one for your subject, or one for whatever your sides might be here that you're trying to pair together. So here's my second exposure for this picture. And all I looked at here was her body and mostly her face, to be honest, to make sure that this combination would look really nice together. Because I think the original picture is quite lovely, but needs a little more retouching to bring out the subject here. So I'm going to use the drag tool. I have both of them open. I'm going to click on this, and I'm literally going to drag it to this picture. So what I'm going to do is I'll make a copy of the layer, and I'm going to literally drag this on top of this one. Make it nice and even. All right, and now we have our 2 versions, okay? And I'm going to mask this, and rather than starting it with a full mask, I'm going to start with an empty mask and add information to my picture. So I have my inverted mask here, and I'm going to use, again, black is to remove and white is to add, and I'm going to start adding the second image into the first image. Essentially, I'm compositing her into her own photograph with the change in exposure, and I'm going to probably start around here. And I'm going to start bringing that in here. All right? And you can automatically see how much more she's popping out from the image here with this edit just by brightening her a little bit. So her arm here is getting a little blown out, and I won't go over that part again. And I'll use black at 100 to go over those edges that I didn't mean to get, such as around her elbow here. I missed it up there. And if you want to see your mask, if you just use your backward slash key, that is the key above enter, you can see here where we are masking in and out in the image, and it makes it a little easier to see what you're doing sometimes if you're sometimes missing your mask. I don't want this at 100. So I'm just going to keep editing her in a little bit more. So the part that is masked out, aka the black areas, are what's being shown here in red. And if red isn't your thing, you can change that in preferences into any color you would rather look at while you're doing these kind of edits. But it helps me kind of keep track of what I've worked on so far or might have missed. All right. Get this hair. All right. And I'm going to stop here because her arm gets kind of bright. And I really just want to make her face nice and bright here. So I just want to make sure that this part is the part that's not too dark. And if I turn off that slash now, using the slash key to turn off what my mask looks like, we can see what we're working with so far here. And what I would do now that we can see this change here is just blend it just a little bit more so that these edges aren't quite so sharp. For example, this line here that I made. So I'm going to work at a kind of low opacity, at a very low, if not any hardness. And I'm just going to try to make this line a little less apparent by kind of pushing it back and forth here. And just working with the shadows of the picture a little bit to kind of and blend her in. So what I am doing right now is masking out some of these parts that I think could use just a little more definition. All right. Still think this part here is just a little bit too noticeable for me. All right, and that's actually pretty good. This is a really great start. So now you can see here where we've masked her in, and we can see how much it's enhanced that photograph already. I'm going to just do a couple other little touch-ups, such as like this part of the hair I think just looks a little too much brightened. Try to give a little bit of dimension to this positioning of her hand here. All right. She seems a little bit, she's much more in focus, seeming, pops out towards us a little stronger. And I think that that looks kind of nice. So the last things I would do here would be probably a dodge and burn on her face, as well as to bring out the hair light that's being caught here. So just trying to make sure we don't lose her hair here by lightening it too much. All right. Okay, and then pretty much what I would do after this is, like I said, my dodge and burn. So I have my new layer. I'm going to fill it with 50% gray. I'm going to put this on overlay. And I'm going to use black and white to paint on some light and shadow. So I might want to lighten, you know, her eyes a little bit if I could. Maybe make it, oh, too much. All right, so I'm just working on adding a little bit of light here to bring out eyeballs. really nice details like this, the edge of the nose, the highlight on the cheekbone, the highlight of the chin. You know, for real high-end touching up, you're going to want to do these parts here and just really try to bring out this kind of definition for a beauty shot. Okay, a little more light in here, I think is needed. You know, touch up things like the brow bone, the very center of the eye. All right, this cheek here a little. I'm going to do a really light brush over her forehead. Okay, and then I'm going to go back in and, you know, I actually would do things like her jawline. Let's bring that out. Too much. So you can see here, I'm making an edit, and if I just think it's too much, I just go back and I start over with where I was. All right. And then you can burn the things that you might want to burn. I would start also, you know, I've been working at a pretty low opacity. I'd work pretty low, but just try to bring in maybe the shape of the eyebrow, the crease, right? Eyelashes, things that need a little more shadow here. Cupid's bow. This nice edge here will really separate the nose from the mouth. A little bit of darkness under the lips. A little bit of darkness under the chin. I'm going to make these neck bones come out a little bit. All right, and I can already tell that I way lightened her eyes too much. So I'm going to my history layer. I'm going to go to where I started this. So I'm going to go back to about here. And I'm just going to make this a little less bright of an edit. Okay. And it's still a little bright to me. And you can easily just, I usually work a little too light and then just bring down the opacity. Okay. A little more darkening here. All right. And you could, you know, work with like parts like this and try to make the hands stick out a little bit more. Get that definition here from the fingers, the knuckles. All right. And that's already a little better too. All right. So we just add a little more light to her body. I would probably do things like bring out the highlight here. And the last thing that I would do here is she has this really nice hair light kind of going around. You can see how her hair is being caught by light. And so I would just want to kind of enhance that a little bit. So I'm just going to bring that light out that she's got catching her hair. Okay, and if I was really going to be a little meticulous about this, well, let's just do it. Let's be meticulous, Natalie. I think that this part of the hair is just catching a little bit too much of the blue as opposed to this nice auburn color. And we can fix that. So again, color edit, a specific question I've been given here. I'm on the image layer. I am using my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to find a color that I like. That one's nice. And I'm just simply going to go with a new layer on the blending mode of hue, which is going to push pixel colors from the color that it's at into the direction of the color you are painting with. So I'm going to try to change this blue into a little bit more of a brown. And let's see, what's our opacity here? I'll bring this up a little higher. Much. And I'm just going to add a little bit of that color up here to try to combat this blue and green that's happening on the top. And you can see how I kind of go back and forth with what my color is that I'm using to make the proper edit. And I think that improved things a little bit. Much better. I think the last thing I would do is a very selective high pass. I think that's something like, you know, separating her body here and our dodge and burn could be done, right? Just more dimensional work, you know. Oh, too light, too light, too light. You know, so burning maybe this a little bit, trying to just separate her from the background. I could take the opportunity maybe to show you guys here, again, the spot healing and healing brush tool. So here I have my healing brush tool selected. I'm going to go on to my image, and I'm going to make a selection. All right, and I'm going to get rid of this. The thing about, again, the history brush tool that's really great is that you can go back, put this at 100. There's my healing brush edits. I'm going to mark it for here. And I'm just going to remove where I got into her a little bit. And that looks terrible. Let's try again. I have my healing brush tool. I'm going to make an edit here with the line, which we've gone over also, starting here with a line in order to make sure that the edits don't get kind of blurred out. Make sure you're on the right layer. And just try to edit that out. Like that, that's much better. Okay, and now at least that pole is missing there. We'll do the high pass. So I'm making a copy of this layer. I'm putting on high pass. All right. I'm going to bring it up here so that way it's applying to everything underneath it. I'll move this to overlay like we have been. And I'm going to make it a mask. I'm going to double click this mask, and just like before, I'm going to invert it and paint it only where I want it, which is honestly just going to be this part of her, this part, and then that's it. The point of this is to be very dreamy, and I can tell that the edit is to be kind of blurred, so I just want to make sure that we're not losing her despite that kind of an edit there. Okay. And now we just have a little more definition on our face. So you can see that difference there in the sharpness that it has given her. All right, so you can see that. And then lastly, let's crop it. I would probably crop this in first of all so I don't have to see the building, so we're going to start with that. And then I'll kind of look at this and decide how I think this would look best. And I think that it would look best if she's on this third here. So I'll just compensate a little bit with that cropping. And try to just have that intersection right in the center of her face. And that's our final image now. With the retouches that I have done to the original. So the original here is this one. Right, that was our original. And we have ended with this. Again, masking, dodging and burning, and slight color changes through blending mode, all right, edits, as well as a little sharpening here, okay? So I think overall, as a class, our pictures are pretty dark, and this is probably the main thing that I would suggest focusing on in the future. This picture is just a teeny dark and a little bit too yellow, so really simple edit here. I'm going to use the curves layer and just try to bring up this a little bit. I'm going to put it on lumosity like I mentioned before. I think it's better for a color edit, or for not enhancing the color. I don't want that to be different. Okay, so that made that a little brighter. I'm going to next color balance this to try to make those papers look white. And that's already a little better. I think it's a little pink. And I would also crop this. Two, three, yes, please. And I would also crop this. And I would probably crop this. So in my crop tool, I have my original ratio. I don't mean to change proportions of the image here. I just want to center it a little more. Okay. And that's already a little better. You could use the dodge and you can use the dodge and burn tools. To enhance the text and the paper. So I would go in here and just try to bring in that text a little bit. Okay. And of course you could dodge it also, just to make those papers a little brighter. And I already think that's a little better. I think we could use a little more color. Particularly in these, the floor. So let's just bring that up a little bit. And I think that looks pretty good now. You could, as I always say that I do, high pass, just to make things look a little crunchier and sharper. So let's put this on our blending mode for overlay. You can see here that this is like really sharpening it to a point of excessiveness. So I'm going to first mask out some of this where I think it's a little bit too much. And then I'm just going to bring down the opacity a little bit for the whole layer. And I think that looks already really great. Let's see what else we have here. So the next one I wanted to show is this sign that Chris turned in. And the main thing I wanted to review with this is a little bit of lighting and texture work, as well as potentially straightening this. I'm at least going to give it a shot. So I actually want to start with that. Edit, transform. And I'm going to start with skew. And I'm going to try to line up this image a little straighter. That actually looks pretty good to me. I think I would probably get rid of that little corner there that I just missed. So let's do that. Okay. And now it's pretty straight. If you want to check that this is straight, you can show under the view, right, because you're trying to view it in your screen. In the view drop-down menu under show, you can put a grid up and you can see here whether or not this is aligned and how much it is or is not. And I did a pretty decent job for eyeballing it. You could, of course, just try to fix that a a little bit more. I think that this corner here is just a little too high. Or low, I mean, excuse me. All right, so that's pretty good. And I think that this could use to be a little brighter overall. I'd use the curves adjustment layer for this. You can see what our distribution is of low grays and dark grays, blacks, middle grays, and then our light grays, which we don't have many of. And this is what I want to try to find. So I'm going to bring this over a little bit to try to find our white. And I think it's already a good idea. I mean, already much better. And using the curves layer a little bit to enhance that by bending that down a little more, I think looks really nice. And so I'm essentially using this to make a nice curve here in our curves layer in order to enhance our variety of value here. And now you can see it's a little higher contrast. And using curves and blending with a different blending mode is also sometimes kind of worth it, particularly for some high retouch edits. Using this on lumosity rather than normal does not really change the color quite as much. And if I put it on normal, which I will show you, you can see how there's a lot more green in the picture, a lot more of the colors being brought out, whereas here it's just kind of looking at the value there. So I prefer that also to this edit. I think that I would do a dodge and burn. I did go over what the non-destructive dodge and burn was, but in case anyone has forgotten, the tools are right here. This is when you edit directly on the picture. So I'm going to just burn the letters out a little bit, I think, to bring them a little more into focus. Really show this wear and tear of this sign here by bringing out these text. All right, and of course you can do the opposite with dodging it to bring out this weird texture that's kind of like crunchy looking there. 4% is a little too high. Let's bring it down. All right, and this should be affecting the whites really nicely. Great. Okay, and just by toggling with this, you can see the difference in not only the color, but the straightening of it. I suppose I could also sharpen this one. Again, high pass, really easy one to use here. And I'm going to stick that over into overlay. And if I turn off my grid, you can see how incredibly sharpened that made that. It's a little too much in my opinion. It looks overly sharpened, and I'm just going to bring that down a touch as a whole. All right. So just a couple other little edits here to wrap up this tutorial. We have this masked statue here. Thank you, Mason. And I want to not only brighten the whole image, although having a little underexposed is pretty good here because we would have lost all of this sky definition here if the image was much brighter. So we can work with what we have. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a curves layer, and when I do this work, I'm actually just going to look at the statue, and I'm not really going to look too much at anything else because I know it's going to be too bright. Okay, and I'm going to invert that. I did that by double clicking the mask that's already present. All adjustment layers are masks already. So if this is already a mask, we're just going to double click that and invert it. And I'm going to paint this in on the statue. Perhaps the best way to start here would be to select him, making sure we have all of him, and none of that background. Don't want those. Okay, let's see, I don't want that. All right, that's pretty good. I'm going to do a slight feather. So my selection drop-down menu, I'm going to modify my selection to feather it, just to make this look a little more realistic. Oh, I actually need to get him all the way. Missed his shoulder there. All right. Now I'm going to modify my selection, and I'm going to save it. All right. And now that we have him selected, I'm going to start adding some light onto him. So let's just start brightening him up. Let's add a little more to start. Okay. And I'm also going to do it in all of this part of the background, just a little bit, a little brightening here. Now, since I'm working with a JPEG and I'm not working with a raw file that has all the information of the original image, brightening it too much will end up bringing in a lot of grain. You could probably see it if I zoomed in a lot. You can see the grain coming out in this part, which wasn't as apparent before when it was darker, but you can start seeing these little dots of red and green and stuff coming out. So we have to be pretty careful as we do these edits to not make him look too pixelated or grainy. Okay. And I think that that's pretty good. You can see here that I probably have brightened the mask the most. I consider that, you know, pretty much the most important part here. I still think the image is overall a little dark. Actually, this image is pretty good. I would enhance the color in his situation. And now I'm looking now at the things around him and not at him, our little stashy man. But I want to really bring in some color in that sky and in the water if it's possible. We're getting a little out of there, all right? And I'm going to mask him out by using black. I'm going to just take away that extra color that's being added to him because I know that the grain is going to come out more if I enhance that color change. So I'm just going to... So you can see here I'm using the slash tool to check how I'm adding or removing, in this case, my mask. So I'm just going to try to go around him the best I can. Oh, we don't have to do that. We're going to open our selection under this second drop-down menu. You'll see our saved selection. I'm going to push OK. And I'm going to take away this edit on him, just make sure he's totally covered with the red. Make sure he doesn't have that extra color come out because we don't want that. All right, and since I see that I missed the edges a couple spots, and for sake of showing you for sample, you can of course invert your selection, which would select everything else. So in the select drop-down menu, you can see inverse here. It's going to be the third or fourth selection for you. And now you can see that our marching ants are surrounding the whole image, and he is considered not selected. And I am going to remove these areas here that I accidentally painted on. Okay. And now he has a little less of that blue color on him, even though the background has been highly enhanced. I would probably do a second layer just for the sky, just to try to bring in as much of that color as possible. So I'm doing another edit right now, and I'm just looking at the sky. I'm not looking at anything else because I'm not going to let that edit stay anywhere else. And I'm just going to try to put more blue into our sky. And again, this wouldn't have been able to be done if the sky was super blown out, but luckily it's not. All right, and now I'm going to double click on my layer, invert it, and I'm going to add a little more color to our sky with the white paintbrush tool, and just try to bring that out a little more. And you could even probably add a little more water to try to get some more of that color in there too. And now I think this looks pretty good. I don't mind a little bit of the blue that's in here. I think that I would make a dodge and burn tool. I mean a dodge and burn layer. I pretty much always make a dodge and burn layer while I work. It's a really nice way to enhance the lighting and make things look as dimensional as possible. So I'm going to do a slight dodge and burn here, particularly just to bring him to the forefront. Make him look nice and metallic. Enhance this brim. Nice flower. Top of the head. This is a nice little spot, right? So you just want to make sure that we can see what we should be seeing here. And of course, you're going to go back in with the burn tool or with your paintbrush on black and just try to bring in some of those shadows. Right under the hat. And I'd probably do a little bit of burning for things like back here just to push that back a little bit more. So I'm going to do a quick layer just to try to tone down that background. And actually the best way to do that would be to load our selection. We have our statue. I'm going to invert that. And now I'll do this edit and I don't have to worry about accidentally touching him. And then that's just going to have a little bit less distraction from the background information here, which is pretty colorful and pretty well lit. So we just want to make sure that that's not going to be too distracting. And now we have this really nice separation of the statue from the background. So I'm going to do, again, I'm going to finish this up with my high pass. So I made a copy of the layer. I'm dragging it to the top of the list. And I'm going to use high pass. Again, high pass is in the other section of the filter drop-down menu, and we are going to select high pass. You could increase and decrease the radius. Honestly, really high is worth checking out, but well, let's just see it. It looks so incredibly sharpened. It looks usually pretty bad. And you can see here how that looks just so highly sharpened. It's just not even enhancing the picture anymore. I usually work at less than 10. Sometimes I'm working actually even at like 5. All right, and now I will, and it's still pretty sharpened looking to me. I'm going to make a mask out of this because this is not a mask. This is an image layer. And I'm going to do that by selecting the mask tool. And I'm actually going to just do it on him. Again, I really want to try to get as much attention on him as possible. And things like the water and stuff can get sharpened and be very distracting. So we're just going to try to pull attention to the very front here by working solely on our man. Let's select him. Okay, and I'm just going to run over this to try to bring out some of his texture. We can see here how he's appeared. I'm going to go over him again. And now I'm just going to go over a little bit of this part. And then I'm going to lower this opacity and just bring in a little bit of the things that are closest to us to kind of make the focus of the camera seem reasonable, right? All right, that's actually really great. And if I really wanted to push this farther, I would honestly consider making another layer to soften it. I'm going to make sure it's in the right spot here. I don't want to have an image that isn't being affected by these hue and saturation layers, curves, things like that. Okay. All right, so he's looking pretty nice and sharp. And now what we're going to do is soften him. So you can see here I'm starting to gather quite a lot of layers. And I'm going to want to organize that to make it easier to work. First I'm going to blur this man. Gaussian blur is pretty much the photographer's go-to. Lens blur is also all right. Surface blur can work, especially for skin. But I usually start with this one first. It's a pretty nice go-to here. And I'm going to, we still have our sharpened figure here. I'm going to call this the softening tool. All right, this is going to be dodge and burn, high pass. All right, and I'm starting to be able to at least keep track of this a little bit. All right, so now that we have this softening layer up, I'm going to mask it. And I'm going to bring it in. Select, load selection, statue, okay. I'm going to inverse it because I don't want to soften the statue, I want to soften the background. And now I'm going to do so. By using white, I made a mistake. I have to invert it first. Now I will make my selection. I will inverse it. And I'm going to just heavily add on some of this. Let's try to push that back a little bit. And honestly, I could have had probably a heavier blur than this. But we're just trying to fake a little bit of a depth of field. Okay, and now I think that this is a little more refined looking, much more finished, much more balanced lighting. Again, to show you how this started, we started with this here, right, kind of dark, kind of desaturated. We understand what we're supposed to be looking at, but it's difficult to do so, and we ended just by with this one here. High passing, sharpen, dodge and burn, adding light and shadow. A couple of mask for color. We have this one here for the sky and the water. We have this one for the whole background. We have our curves layer, which adjusted the brightness. Right. We have this, which is added our color to the sky and the water. This one also enhances that. Right. So we have these to really add some blue to that gray that we have. All right. We have our softening going on. It might be kind of hard for you to see in the recording, but if I toggle between this when I'm actually looking at the part I wanted to make the most blurred, which is these parts here, it could be potentially very distracting with the color and the textures and stuff. When I turn that on, you can see that it seems much more out of focus. And because of that, our depth of field is forcing us to look directly at this guy. I could do a couple small things like, you know, getting rid of those kind of marks here in the background. But that's considered done to me also. And so this is done for me. And then the last one I want to look at is this is the last one I would like to look at. This is mostly for a little bit of color balancing here and working a little more with lighting. So let's start with, and I often just try to do this kind of a color balance first because I find that it actually works pretty well. But if you do remember, I showed you guys um, a really great way to white balance using the gray picker tool. So I suggest you going and looking at that tutorial. To get a little refresher. So there's our adjustment layer. I'm going to bring down that black a little bit to make sure we are still getting nice blacks. And now I'm going to do an edit here where I'm just looking at this screen. We could try levels maybe, or curves, and just try to work on making this couple in here. Okay, so I don't like how the levels is working out. I'm going to try curves. And again, I'm just looking at the phone screen as I work. I'm going to invert that, and I'm just going to paint on that edit to try to bring out a little more attention to this phone screen here. And now we can see some other details like this going on right here, right? I think that I would probably, I don't know if I can do it well enough with the curves layer. No, I don't like that. I would do a dodge and burn, of course. %, gray at overlay. And I'm just going to try to make this look a little more lit by using the light that's already present. So let's see what we have, 59, that's too high. We'll bring out these highlights here, right? This nice highlight on the thumb. Get those hands muscles showing, right? And get this nice highlight here. Just try to bring out some light here. And you could even do it to them a little bit if you wanted. And then I'll use black, and I'll go through the shadows really quick. And I'm going to go over all of the black parts on the phone multiple times to try to get that to be a nice, realistically iPhone black kind of color. So we're going to go over this a couple times too. As I mentioned before, I usually work at a pretty low opacity because it's much easier to just build on slow instead of potentially making too harsh of an edit at one time. Okay, get some definition here. There's people driving, they're talking. All right, let's work on that like you would any other photograph. All right, now our iPhone's looking much blacker, a little more, a little less blown out by that highlight that we had before. You could try to maybe bring in what the button looks like here. All right, and just with this dodge and burn layer, we've added like a lot more focus to what we want to be looking at. Similar to the last edit, I would also do a sharpening and a blurring here. Okay, so let's start with a blur. Let's start with a blur. I want to actually make the blur a little more, so let's make this a little stronger. Okay, and the picture should show you a sample of how strong that blur is, and I think that that's pretty good. Okay, now we have our blurred image, and I'm going to make a mask out of it. Boop. I'm going to invert it. Boop. And now I'm going to add a little more blur to the background here. I would probably select this first with the quick selection tool to make sure we don't accidentally, blur out the subject matter. With my quick selection tool brush. Okay. Nice, nice, okay. And let's just save the selection in case we need it. I'm going to call this subject. And now I'm actually going to select the background. So I didn't select the background first because I thought it'd be much easier to select these. It's very large blocks of color, really easily distinguish these lines for the most part, and having the background might have caused a little bit more of a problem. So now I have my in version of my original selection, and I'm going to paint on that blur layer at a pretty high opacity to start with, and try to just push those things into the distance. So I'm working with a lower opacity, like I say, as I always do, but I also want to make sure this plant isn't like blurrier than the other parts. So I'm going to do this part separate from the plant now and try to have a little bit more. Again, we've been forcing a fake depth of field, if you will, right? So that's kind of what I still want to make sure we're doing that. All right, and now we have this blur that we've added. Okay, and that already really brings our eye here a little more. However, I'm going to do another layer. I'm doing a background copy by doing Command J. Okay. Okay. Filter, other, high pass. Now the reason we're seeing the image that is behind it here is because we have an image on top of this layer that's open right now, that white part. The black part is what's visible underneath it, right? The erased part, if you will. I could drag it up, but we're already here and I want it to be this way, so. I'm going to push OK. We're going to move it over to overlay. And now we got some really nice sharpness here, all right? It's probably a little too intense. But now our focus is much more drawn directly to this couple here, between the blurring of the background and the sharpening of the screen and the leather in front of us. And I think that looks pretty good that way. I'm deciding if I'd crop it or not, but I think that this is pretty finished. So again, to show you how we started off here, a little very yellow and green, and a little more difficulty directing straight to the subject, whereas now the skin tone looks the proper color here, and we have really nice texture and sharpness in the front, and a really nice blur in the back, which is kind of like forcing a depth of field, right? A shallow depth of field. And I think that that's pretty good here. So this is where we're going to stop our tutorial. I hope that helped clarify some things with the review. And this is our last one.